Story 1. The Watcher of Wren Lane. Sara and Imran had always dreamed of owning a home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, away from the constant noise and chaos of city life. After months of searching, they finally found the perfect place, a charming old house on Wren Lane. It had a white picket fence, a small garden, and an oak tree that seemed to reach up into the sky as though it had been standing watch over the street for centuries. It felt like a picture from a magazine, the kind of place where you could raise a family and enjoy a peaceful life. But the tranquility of Wren Lane didn't last. At first, everything seemed perfect. The neighbors were friendly, the area was quiet, and the house itself had an undeniable warmth. Sara and Imran spent their days unpacking, setting up their home and starting to envision the future. But something felt off. It was subtle at first, a slight unease whenever Sara was alone in the house, a whisper in the wind that felt too intentional. Then came the letters. The first one arrived on a Tuesday, tucked into the mailbox along with the usual bills and junk mail. It was handwritten in elegant, yet uneven script, as though the writer had taken their time with each word. The letter was addressed to Sara, and it read, "I've been watching you, Sara. I see you through the window. Your smile is so beautiful, but it hides your loneliness. I wonder if Imran truly sees you." Sara was initially baffled. Who would send such a letter? It felt so personal, like the writer knew her on a level she couldn't comprehend. She showed the letter to Imran, who laughed it off, dismissing it as some bored neighbor trying to stir things up, he said. The next letter arrived a few days later, addressed to Imran this time. The handwriting was the same, but the message was even more unsettling. "You don't know it yet, but I'm always here. You come home late, and I watch you as you sleep. The house is mine now." Sara's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't some harmless joke. Whoever was sending these letters was obsessed. She tried to shake off the growing fear, but the letters kept coming, each one more invasive than the last, describing moments from their daily lives in alarming detail. The letters knew things no one could have known: what Sara wore to bed, the exact spot where Imran sat when he was reading his newspaper. The most chilling detail was when one letter described Sara's favorite spot on the couch, even down to the indentation on the cushions where she usually sat. That night, when Sara was home alone, she felt a cold draft in the house. The windows were all shut, and yet the chill seemed to be coming from somewhere deep within the walls. It was as if the house itself was breathing, sighing in the darkness. Then came the sounds. It started with a soft rustling noise in the basement. Sara, heart pounding, told herself it was just the house settling. But when she checked, she found the dog, locked in the basement cage, trembling and whimpering. The door had been closed, but Sara was certain she had left it open earlier that day. She called Imran in a panic, but when he answered, the line went dead. Her fear turned to panic. She ran upstairs, feeling the walls close in around her. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the floorboards felt like someone was following her. The atmosphere was thick with dread, and the more she tried to rationalize it, the more it seemed to slip away from her understanding. The next day, they reported the incidents to the police. The officers came to investigate, but they found nothing. No sign of a break-in, no fingerprints, nothing unusual. It didn't make sense. They even searched the house top to bottom, but it was as though the house itself was hiding the truth. Days passed, but the letters didn't stop. They kept coming, sometimes arriving in the mailbox, sometimes slipping under the door. Then one evening, Sara came home to find the door wide open. She felt a surge of panic. Imran wasn't home, and the house felt wrong. The lights flickered, the air felt heavy. As she walked through the hall, she heard a faint sound, soft, almost imperceptible. It was coming from the attic. Curious and terrified, Sara made her way up to the attic. There, in the dusty, forgotten corner, she found something that chilled her to the bone. Hidden behind a loose piece of drywall was a small, cramped crawl space. And inside that space, there was something far worse than any letter could have prepared her for. An old cot, stained with years of use, lay against the wall. Empty food wrappers, abandoned bottles of water, and scraps of paper were scattered around the floor. But the worst part wasn't the mess. It was the journal. The journal's pages were filled with detailed, obsessive entries. They described Sarah's every move, what she wore, where she went, how she smiled. There were drawings, too, sketches of her, of the house, of the rooms she spent the most time in. The last entry was the most chilling of all. "I've been here all along. I watch you every day, Sarah. Every step you take, every breath you draw. You're mine now. There is nowhere to run." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The reality of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. They were no longer alone in the house. The stalker wasn't someone on the outside. They had been living there, hidden, for God knows how long. They immediately decided to leave, but as they packed their things, Sarah noticed something horrifying. The house, once full of warmth and promise, now seemed cold, suffocating. It was as if the walls were closing in on them, trapping them there. Months later, Sarah and Imran moved to another city, trying to start fresh. But one day, a letter arrived at their new home. They opened it hesitantly. "Welcome to your new home. I've been waiting for you. This time, I won't let you go." Story 2. The Crying Tree. Sukpa was a village steeped in legends. The locals spoke of the Rahani Darakt, the crying tree, with a mixture of awe and fear. According to the villagers, anyone who heard the tree cry would be marked for death. But it wasn't just the sound that haunted people. It was the knowledge that the tree's roots had grown deep over the graves of women who had been accused of witchcraft during the British colonial era. Their souls, trapped in the earth, were said to haunt the tree forever. Wasim, a young schoolteacher, had just arrived in the village. Skeptical of such old superstitions, he dismissed them as nothing more than folklore. He was a man of reason, a believer in science and logic, so when he heard the story of the crying tree, he shrugged it off. However, the villagers seemed to speak of it with such conviction that he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the back of his mind. It wasn't long before Wasim began hearing strange things at night. It started with a faint, almost imperceptible cry, a sound that seemed to echo from deep within the forest. At first he thought it was an animal, but the more he listened, the more he realized that it wasn't like anything he had ever heard before. It wasn't the cry of a bird or a beast. It was the sound of someone weeping. One evening, unable to shake the curiosity gnawing at him, Wasim decided to investigate. He ventured into the forest alone, his lantern casting long shadows on the path ahead. As he approached the clearing where the crying tree stood, the air grew colder, the atmosphere heavy with an unnatural stillness. The tree was even more imposing than he had imagined. Its gnarled branches twisted and reached toward the heavens like skeletal fingers. The ground around it was covered in thick roots, almost as if the tree was trying to drag itself deeper into the earth. And beneath the tree, there was a strange mist, pale, glowing, and curling around the roots like something alive. The crying grew louder, more desperate. Wasim's heart began to race. He tried to dismiss the feeling that was creeping over him, but it was impossible to ignore. It was as though the very air around him was thick with an invisible presence, watching him, waiting. Suddenly he heard a voice. It was soft, like a whisper, but clear enough for him to hear it above the wind. "Wasim." He spun around, his lantern flickering in the sudden breeze, but there was no one there. His breath caught in his throat as he realized the voice had come from the tree itself. Fear gripped him, but curiosity pushed him forward. He reached out and touched the bark of the tree. It was cold, unnaturally so, and as his fingers brushed against the surface, the world seemed to shift. The wind howled around him, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble. In that moment, Wasim knew that the legends were not just stories, they were warnings. That night, Wasim barely slept. The sound of the weeping tree echoed in his mind, and when he closed his eyes, he saw visions of women. Ghostly figures with hollow eyes, their faces twisted in agony. They were trapped beneath the tree, their souls bound to its roots. The next morning, The village elder, Haji, came to him with a solemn expression. "Did you hear it?" Haji asked, his voice trembling. Wasim nodded. "The crying? It came from the tree." Ispi turned pale. "You should not have gone near it, Wasim. The tree holds the souls of the wronged women, and their anger is what keeps the village in its grip. The crying is a warning." But Wasim was too stubborn to heed the warning. He ventured to the tree again, determined to uncover its secrets. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. When his body was found, it was beneath the crying tree, lifeless, with an expression of pure terror etched across his face. His eyes were wide open, frozen in fear. The villagers say that sometimes, when the wind blows just right, you can still hear Wasim's screams, carried on the breeze. The crying tree still weeps, and the souls of the wronged women continue to seek revenge on those who dare to disturb them. Story 3. Flight 306. Non-stop to nowhere. Flight 306 from Dubai to Istanbul was supposed to be a routine, uneventful journey. The passengers settled into their seats, some reading books, others watching movies or listening to music. Among them was Saira, a young travel vlogger eager to share her journey with her growing audience. She was excited for the adventure that lay ahead. But soon after takeoff, something strange happened. It started with a flicker in the overhead lights, followed by a sudden drop in temperature. Saira pulled her jacket tighter around her, looking around at the other passengers who were beginning to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The flight attendants moved with an odd robotic precision, offering drinks and snacks without saying a word, their faces expressionless. Saira felt a growing sense of unease. She tried to shrug it off, thinking it was just the stress of travel, but something wasn't right. Then the plane began to change course. The flight's GPS showed the plane was circling over the same patch of ocean, but they should have been much farther along in their journey. The flight attendants seemed oblivious to the oddity, continuing with their tasks as if nothing was amiss. Saira pulled out her phone to check the time, but it wouldn't connect to any network. The entertainment system was down. The plane's clock had stopped at 2:17 a.m. Panic started to creep in as the seconds ticked by. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. We will update you as soon as we know more." But the minutes stretched into hours. Passengers began to whisper nervously among themselves, wondering why they hadn't been told what was happening. Saira decided to investigate. She slipped out of her seat and made her way toward the cockpit. When she reached the door, she knocked, but there was no answer. She turned the handle, but it wouldn't open. Through the small window, she could see the pilot and co-pilot sitting perfectly still, their heads turned away from the door. They didn't move. It was as if they were frozen in time. The unease in her stomach grew into full-blown fear. She returned to her seat, clutching her phone, trying to contact her followers for reassurance, but there was no signal. The lights flickered again, and the air grew colder. Something was very wrong. Suddenly, a sharp scream pierced the silence. Saira rushed toward the sound, her heart racing, and found a woman standing in the aisle, her eyes wide with terror. She was pointing at the window, whispering, "We're not supposed to be here. This is wrong. We're lost in time." Before Saira could respond, the plane began to shake violently. The ground below them vanished, replaced by an endless expanse of darkness. The lights flickered once more, and then everything went black. When the plane landed, it wasn't in Istanbul. It was in an empty field, the runway lined with abandoned planes. There were no airport staff, no customs officials, just a vast emptiness. The passengers disembarked, unsure of what had happened or how they had ended up there. The world outside seemed eerily quiet, as though they had been transported to another dimension. And in the distance, there was a faint sound, a soft, mechanical hum, the hum of an airport that was long abandoned, the sound of something that had been waiting for them to arrive,